On air. Okay. Hey, thank you very much for joining. I think it's an important and great topic, and we have Gabriel here as the expert. And as we saw in our preparation, he will have a short presentation and I guess some short demo. And as we said, please ask question directly, or write it into the chat. More than happy to ask them then and to read them out. So yeah, maybe Lars, you want to say something?
Yeah, so
Uh,
if you can turn on the camera, that's what I'm always saying. And uh, Gabriel, pretend I don't know you for more than 10 years, 15 actually. Who are you and what exactly are you doing at Adobe?
Oh, Lars, really nice meeting you. I mean, it's a long time. I would have loved to meet you. I'm glad that's now the case, but also all of you here. And yeah, I'm the product manager for the Universal Editor, our topic today. I've been working a lot on product management, like, I don't know, 10 years or so. It started actually with Lars inviting me to join the product management team. Originally, it would have been actually for our community features at that time, which then didn't happen. And then I just actually became a sites product manager, working a lot also together with Cedric Hüsler. And I've been responsible for, yeah, the page editor, but more actually even more probably the core components, all the features around the core components, and now the Universal Editor.
Very cool. Okay.
Let me share my screen as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't really want to spend much time in slides, but I have a few and we can come back to them later maybe. Maybe just one slide to get started. I mean, the Universal Editor is visual editor. So, I mean, the purpose of this editor is to kind of give you as author, non-technical authors, mostly the sense of preview what they are doing, so that they are not left in the dark, kind of tapping around with making changes and kind of guessing how it will affect the site. So yeah, also, I mean, if they just struggle to find the content, that is also a big key feature of the Universal Editor. You can just open the page and start editing. You get the context. I mean, you edit content, it's really related also to a context. So yeah, sure. You can probably more easily create layouts with Visual Editor than if you don't have a preview. So that certainly helps. And yeah, probably makes you a bit more creative as an author, because you can probably better explore what you're doing and the options you have at hand than if you have like maybe a form-based editor, or if you're also sometimes in documents, if the layout is very complex or unrelated to how the document is looking, that might also help. Here a bit of context of how the Universal Editor is kind of positioned. It's editor not only for edge delivery services, but also if you have your own headless implementation, if you have a decoupled application that retrieves some content from AEM, that can be edited just as well with the Universal Editor. But yeah, with EDS, if you want to not only have a visual editor, but also use any of the features from the AEM platform, like multi-site management, AEM workflows, all these features, launches, and so on. I mean, they are available on the AEM platform, and you can use them obviously also with the Universal Editor.
Shall I already jump in with a question?
Go ahead.
Sure.
Because we have already one in the chat from Raf. I would like to understand how we might describe layout control between editable templates and layout control in Universal Editor.
Yeah, sure. I'll get to that. And yeah, local development. Okay, yeah, one thing after the other. That's great. No, I don't.
Gabriel,
Yeah,
before you proceed to the next slide, I have a question about this slide in particular. So I'm seeing I'm seeing document-based authoring. I'm seeing Universal Editor. I think I'm seeing the content fragment editor. The thing that I don't see is the traditional page editor that is being used in the majority of AEM implementations at this time. What's the future of that editor?
So the future of the page editor is to stay mostly as it is. We certainly don't want to force customers into having to redo everything just because there is a new editor there. So if you have the page editor and it works, then by all means continue using it. That's great. But for new projects, the Universal Editor is replacing the page editor more and more. So that is really its intent. And I actually have a slide here that might help, kind of showing you the history here of the editors. So yeah, you have, your experience is retrieving content from page, but maybe also from other content. And yeah, you have the page editor that allows to visually edit that experience and save the content in the pages. Then we came up with the SPA editor also, which is just actually kind of a enhancement of the page editor so that it works also if your experience is rendered.
And SPA here stands for
single page
application, not a
so if your experience is using React or Angular, you can use our SDK and make the page editor kind of work with it. So that's what we mean with SPA editor. So SPA editor is not a different editor. It's a way how the page editor can work with React or Angular implementation if you use our SDK.
Okay.
And then, their customers with single page applications wanted to have it server-side rendered, Node.js and such. So we made an evolution of it called Remote SPA Editor, which kind of was a hack again on top of the SPA editor. I would not call it a hack, but it's kind of a hack on top of an evolution. So it's not that great. And we really reached some limits of how that is working. And then came another thing, content fragments. They already existed for a while, but they became increasingly popular and customers wanted to start to use it. And you cannot edit those with any of these editors here. It's really pages that you're editing. So there was the content fragment editor to edit the content fragments. And that is not within the experience that you edit the content. It's for form-based editor. And the Universal Editor is kind of here on top of all of that. And the idea is we wanted to have an editor that can load this experience. So it's a visual editor, just like the page editor. It loads the experience, but it's able to save content, not only to pages, also to content fragments. And as a roadmap item, it's not yet the case, also maybe to third-party backends. So we don't have that yet, but the idea is really that kind of roadmap, probably next year, we have a possibility also that you can write extensions so that you can save or edit content that might come from other backends. And yeah, now, what do we recommend? If you have a new project, I think we have obviously document-based editing, but in the AEM world, if you're in the AEM world, we have these two editors. These are the ones we really want now customers to use for new projects.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Yeah, and maybe on to showing you the Universal Editor, because we talked a lot about it already. It's if you go to experience.adobe.com, you open here Experience Manager, and then you have it here in that menu entry, Universal Editor. It opens up here and it allows you to drop a URL. You obviously need to have a page that is instrumented to use the Universal Editor. So what does that mean? You will see. I have here a simple application that I can load and that is showing how that's working. Here, basically, that's the application. I can also open the application outside of the Universal Editor. This is this application. In that case here, this is an example of a React application, but like I showed you, or like you saw on the slide before, this could be headless implementation, can be EDS implementation, actually it works the same for the Universal Editor. It does not matter how you have implemented that.
And just to interrupt, when Gabriel is saying EDS, what he means is Edge Delivery Services and Adobe Experience Manager Sites as a cloud service.
Thank you.
And that's
what
we at Adobe say all the time.
Yes, you can say it out. Sure. I won't say it out each time. You got now the the marketing police, and yeah, sure, exactly. Yeah, and this application exactly is loaded in the frame here of the Universal Editor, and yeah, it recognizes the elements of content or the content that is coming from AEM, and it's allowing me to edit it. So it's drawing these blue borders around it, and if I double click on it, I can just start editing. So I'll come, I don't know, whatever. Here I also have rich text editing, obviously. So here I can do whatever rich text edits you might expect. And you see, as an author, I don't need to know where the content is. It doesn't matter. I know that's the page I want to edit, and I can go right away, do the changes. So it's really straightforward on that sense. Images, obviously, the same way. If I just click on the image, I can pick a different one. Whatever. Let's maybe take this dude here, changes the image. And anything that is not editable in context, because you might have other metadata for that component that is not visually represented here, is also available through the panel properties on the side. So here I can edit the same things. Happens here that actually most of the elements that we see are, the dialog doesn't have much more, but I can also edit the same thing here. If I do an edit from here, obviously it will also update the content on the other side. So it's kind of two-way. And like here, I can also open in a more kind of larger editor the same content that I edited before. So if I want to change that even further, I can do that here, right? Yeah.
Should I jump in with questions or?
Yeah, please, anytime.
Okay, there is a question. Hi, I'm trying out Universal Editor for the first time. I want to replicate the EDS blocks on Universal Editor. Is there documentation? Also, I want to add some custom blocks apart from the ones that are already there. Maybe this is for Gabriel or ours.
Yeah. Yeah, let's I mean, I don't have, there is the Universal Editor documentation page, obviously, that you would easily find if you Google for it. And I'll go into the technical details exactly how that works. Yeah, and let me explain you one thing after the other, how it works. Maybe before showing you how it works, let me show you a little bit more what you can do it as an author, and then we switch persona to the developer, right? Mm-hmm. So still on the authoring side, here, all I edited is actually a content fragment, but it does not matter. It could be a component in a page, and you have exactly the same controls and the same editing experience. So that's the first time that we can also visually, with the Universal Editor, edit content fragments. And the nice thing is really doesn't matter for the author where the content is. But if I want to open the content fragment, there is also a button. If in the case that is a content fragment, you have the button, you can switch to the content fragment editor and open it here, and you have that same edit, the same content we edited. We have it here. You see what we put kind of in bold italics. And then you have the content tree, which is also really interesting to understand how things are kind of structured. You see at the bottom here, I have further elements in a list that have also been instrumented to be editable in the Universal Editor. I can edit them just exactly the same way here. So the same thing would be possible. And then at the bottom, we have also a container here. And the container shows content that in that case is not a content fragment, but coming from a page. So here we see it's actually the same kind of editing experience. I also have the properties panel here where now actually this is very simple basic component where I just have for the image component an image field in the dialog, but you could have any dialog here for the text. We just happen to have a text. It's kind of basic, but you see also how you can do drag and drops. So if I want to reorder the elements, I can do that here very easily.
Gabriel,
And on the
what
container-
are the wild numbers at the end of image?
Yeah,
image
that's,
AC and so on.
Yeah, that's just, there is way how actually in your implementation you control these labels. So you can really make these labels whatever you want. Here, the person who implemented that application thought it was cool, probably, to display the node names. So it's actually the node's name in the dialog. It doesn't really help, I think, for an author. Would have been better to name the image, or maybe even to put the alt text of the image here, so you could actually have a more user-friendly text here.
Right.
But yeah, that is actually all something you can control as a developer. And eventually you also have the possibility here to insert new blocks or components. In that case, it's components. I can insert a new image if I wish. That image is being added there, and yeah, I can drag and drop it just as you would expect it, so that I can kind of control a bit better my layout here.
Can I also drag and drop images in the visual part, or only in the tree part of the editor?
For now, it's only in the tree part. We have as a roadmap item that I can also drag and drop it here in the visual part. Obviously, that would be very welcome. Yes.
Okay.
Other roadmap item, like under a container, you can insert new components. For now, if you're selecting a child, you cannot insert anything new. We have also a roadmap item here to have a button. It would insert a sibling in the container. Obviously, that would be helpful. And here we want also to have a bit more visual elements, so you could actually have a way to insert something above or below easily here. So because now each time I insert something, it's adding it to the end of the container. That's kind of painful for authors, depending on what you're trying to do. So yeah, the idea is that you have more control over that as well.
Okay. Yeah. So how does this work with copy and paste? Assuming I have a draft document in a Word file, right? Can I just mark everything and copy and then paste it?
That is also something we would like to have. That's probably more for next year. We would like to have something that is more kind of a refactoring tool here, where, I mean, you could edit all of that in text mode, kind of rich text. So you have a big rich text editor, a bit like what you have with Dark Alley or in a document. So you can edit all of that and then kind of convert it back into components, and it's would allow things like copy pasting things easily from a document into here. Or if you want to refactor something, because maybe, I don't know, these elements, I want to refactor them as a teaser component. So now if I want to refactor them as a teaser component, it's kind of painful. I need to insert a new teaser component, and then I need to copy paste all these values into the new teaser component before I can then delete the old components. So yeah, sure, if I would have more of a kind of, if I could switch between a rich text view here and then back to the component view, that would be very helpful. I think it would kind of bring the value of best of both worlds between document and visual editing. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So now this, how does it work? I mean, in EDS or in a headless implementation, in both cases, it is actually your application that renders that is outputting some data attributes. And the data attributes that you have in the application, so if I look at this application, how it's being rendered, it has some data attributes that is telling actually the Universal Editor what content that is. So for this content we edited here, we have a data attribute saying this is a title property. And then on the parent node, we have a data attribute that is telling of which node in JCR, in that case, that property it is actually. So we know, okay, that's a property of this content fragment, or for the content in the page of which component in the JCR repository. So this is basically what's allowing the Universal Editor to make this editable and to save the changes back to the origin where this content is coming from. And finally, you can have actually multiple AEM instances from this, where this content is being kind of mashed up from or aggregated from. So here we say which connection that is. And in the top of the page, we have here metadata, meta tag, that is kind of declaring that and saying, this is the instance where this is coming from. And that's how it could also have content coming from different sources, because you could have different variables like these being declared, and you could have whatever. Actually, here we have a JCR path, but if you have a different backend, it could be whatever the ID is for your content being put here and saying, okay, that is my connection here, my whatever backend, and have a plugin that's allowing that to write it back to that location. So let me show you in a nutshell this kind of, what do you need to use the Universal Editor? First, there is a script that you need to have on your page, which is actually allowing the cross-domain and cross-frame communication to be possible between the frame of the Universal Editor and the frame of your application, because your application does not need to be hosted by AEM anymore. It can be hosted on any external domain. It can be hosted in AEM as well, doesn't matter. This is what's allowing the communication. Then you need to declare exactly to which backend you're actually, or from which AEM instance the content is coming from, let's say it that way. And then, I mean, for every content you have in the page, you use that variable and you actually say, for that AEM instance, what content is it that we're editing here? It happens to be a container, so that's how you do a container. And then in that container, you have typically a component, okay? And that component has certain properties that you might want authors to be able to edit in context. So that's how you specify the properties. And then you can specify also all kind of attributes to control how you want the authors to be able to edit it. Is it plain text, rich text, media, and maybe in the future other editors that you want to have for that content. Yeah, and then what is really interesting for when you have components is you have also another thing that is the component definition and the component model. Let's look at these two JSON files. So there are two additional JSON files. They can be located anywhere. They can be deployed together with your application, or doesn't really matter, any URL. Oops, sorry for that. Yeah, and this JSON file is basically defining for the components that you have on page, like here, the image, the title, title component we have as well, the text component. For all these components, we need to declare what is the dialog. So you have actually the kind of title typically is maybe a little interesting example because it's simple, but not too simple. You see that the title dialog, so it's now basically the property panel, is just actually one component. It's allowing you to choose the size of the title. And this is what you see then if I'm editing the title here, this one. And it's adding actually automatically also the title property. You don't need to redeclare it in the dialog definition there, because it knows that there is a title because you made the title field actually editable. So this one is kind of coming from for free. You could have it also in the dialog definition, but you don't need this. Only the type needs to be declared there. So this is how you control your dialogs. You don't need to make any CQ dialogs anymore in AEM. And this is also kind of answering the question before, if you want to create your own custom blocks in Edge Delivery Services, right? So what you need to do for your own custom blocks is to define what the property, what the property panel should contain. And this is here. This file is defining that for all the components that you have. It's a very simple example, so I have just very few things here. But actually, let's look at the real Edge Delivery Services example. So let's take this one here. So this is Edge Experience League page. You see you have all your Experience League pages in AEM. So you can do in AEM, you would be able to do in AEM, right? With multi-site management, launchers, and so on. You have all these features there. But when you open the editor, instead of opening the page, it opens the Universal Editor. And just like in the previous example, even though these are all now components in pages, you can edit them that way. And the same way here, we have on this application defined the dialog the same way. We have the component models here, which will be much more complicated here. It's a big JSON file in that case, because this application has a lot of components. So here, if I actually go to a container, you see all the components I have. And obviously, this JSON is kind of aggregating the dialogues for all these blocks. I think that makes it much easier to kind of, make your dialogues, because, you probably know the pain it was with the CQ dialog XML, deeply nested structure. It was hugely complicated. Now we have this field here, really simple. And actually, when you're having content fragments on the page like here, you don't even need to do that, because it will retrieve the model from the content fragment model definition. So the content fragment model is then driving this property panel, and you don't even need to create the dialog. So that's kind of for free in case you're in context editing a content fragment. Then what are the other JSON files for? We have the component filters. The component filters, if we look at this one, is actually defining this plus menu we had. So this plus menu we have here needs to be defined somewhere. Which components can authors add on the page? And what is actually happening when an author is clicking here, this? So if I'm now adding, I don't know, a new title component, what is the Universal Editor writing to the backend? Is there some default text, maybe? It's like default values that need to be set. This is all defined in this other component. No, sorry, that's component filter. It's the component definition. Let me open the right one. Component definition. This is the definition of this drop-down menu. So you see you have all the components, and here you have the title. Typically, what is it creating? So it's creating a component with this resource type. That's what it's doing, and voila, you have your basically title menu defined that way. So the Universal Editor really knows nothing about your application. It can be totally, you control it kind of with your implementation, your data attributes, your JSON files. You control everything about this application. And then there are situations where you want actually to have some, we call that filters. It's kind of, you want to change the behavior of the Universal Editor for a specific situation. Typically, maybe some containers allow more components to be inserted than other containers. So here, if I go to the top container, the only kind of components I can insert at that level are sections in that Edge Delivery Services example. So I need a way to restrict and say, okay, on the main container, I only want to have sections, but then within the inner sections that I have, I want to allow other components. And maybe these components even change based on one section or the other section. And for that, we have the filter definitions. And this was the other JSON that I showed you before. So here, I can kind of control all this behavior. I can say that, I think here, exactly for the main. So we say, okay, we have a way to kind of give this filter a name. We name this filter main. And then we say, okay, for that filter, we only allow the components of type section. And then it is in my markup here that I can, on the main container, if I find it, here it is, I can then apply that filter main and say, okay, here on the main container, I want to apply that filter. And likewise, you have filters for other features of the Universal Editor, like you can constrain the rich text features, you can constrain the image features, you can constrain actually every feature of the Universal Editor can be having filters, and you can declare these filters all here in a central, no, that's the models again, sorry, in the filters file. There we go. You can declare all your filters here, and then in your markup, in the data attributes, you can call these filters and apply these filters how you want. So you really control what the authors can do. And it's really up to the developer to choose what they can do and where they can do it. And the nice thing is you can even have JavaScript that is kind of dynamically changing the DOM and adding or removing data attributes based on maybe something the author is doing. And you could even have logic. So I don't know, if you maybe want to have a script that is preventing some things to be possible based on the content that you have created, you could very well have a filter that is adding this data attribute with the filter dynamically, and the Universal Editor would recognize it, would update its behavior, and we can test this out. Typically, if I go here into editing the DOM, if I, just as a very simple example here, for this title component, remove the property attribute, it will not be in context editable anymore, right? So if I now have that removed, I can still select the title component, but I cannot anymore in context. Whoops, I can. I should not. I made a mistake. Yeah, basically the idea is if you remove the, it has been maybe, I don't know, maybe I need to remove the title as well. The idea is it's really dynamic. So if you change the, yeah, now I cannot edit anymore. So I can now not edit this title anymore. As I double click on other in context editable fields, I can do that, but here I cannot. I can only just select the component because I removed the data attribute that makes it in context editable. I can only edit it through the properties panel because I can still select the component. So you see how you're in charge actually of how the editor is instrumenting or instrumented on your application, right?
Okay, we have a lot of questions.
I'm sure.
I don't know where to start. Okay, but let's start with an easy one, maybe. Tom is interested in the local development with Universal Editor.
Yeah, local, indeed. So local development, you need, there is a good question. I think we have a documentation for that. Let me search for it actually in Google. There is a number of things you need to do. Let me also close a few tabs. First, there is kind of, here these authentication headers are helping you to also have a secret for the connection. I'm not sure if that is needed anymore, but, and you need to run the editor service locally as well. So you can basically, there is this service that's kind of the backend that is storing the content and deciding where the content will be stored. So you can have that set up locally and you can run it in Node or whatever you want. You can configure it accordingly. And I think that's it. Then basically you can have your config to point to the local host that way here. I'm sorry, I've not done that recently, so it's not very fresh in my head.
Okay.
I hope this documentation page will help you, and it should contain everything needed to set it up locally. Let me drop the link actually.
That helps. Then we have a lot of questions about EDS blocks and Universal Editors. So if you have blocks in EDS, as in Edge Library Services, can you replicate them to Universal Editor, and is there a documentation for that? And the other question about Edge Library Services, is it mandatory to use Universal Editor, or can we also use Page Editor? That's the question. Or the questions.
Yeah, sure. For the first one, yes, it's mandatory. The page editor is not capable of opening HTTP services pages. We did that on very early projects where the Universal Editor was not yet ready, but it comes with a huge overhead that I would not recommend any project to use. And the Universal Editor is really the replacement of the page editor in that case. So use that. I think the question is really, yes, it's mandatory. Then to developing edge delivery services blocks. Please ask more questions if you want me to be more specific. But we basically have this boilerplate project that you can use. And that one is allowing you to you have to deploy nothing to AEM anymore with that, because to retrieve the page content, it's using a default Sling model. So you no, it's not even you use the default rendering of the components of the blocks actually with EDS, and all you need to do is to deploy that to your own EDS front end. That's all you need to use. You don't need to deploy anything to AEM anymore, and that's really great. So you can get started here, and then your blocks are defined in here. You see how you can have your cards and whatnot. And here you have as well, is it the right one? I'm not sure. We have somewhere also the component definition and everything. I'm not sure that I'm having the right one actually. Let me search for that.
And if you do that, you can also then work in Universal Editor. So you don't have to do anything special.
Yeah.
Okay. What else do we have? Is there a branch repo with block collection of edge delivery services? Maybe there is also customized for Universal Editor.
That's something we still need to do. There is indeed the block collection for edge delivery services, which is really nice, but they still lack the component model definition, so this JSON file, so that you have a good way to edit them in this property panel. And this is something we should provide out of the box together with the components in this block collection, so that they can be used just as easily in case you want to have the Universal Editor rather than document-based editing. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope that answers the question. Is it straightforward to create a block that can be used on either a document-based site or an AEM Universal Editor-based site? I think that's exactly what you said. It's not that easy, not that straightforward.
Well, the only thing you need to add is basically this model definition file, right? So this is what you need to create. So to define what you have in the property panel. Otherwise, it's easy. Otherwise, there is not much to do.
Yeah.
And this really brings value, I think, to the author, because you kind of need to label your things, right? Your properties. Yeah.
And basically, any page that you are able to edit using Universal Editor and Crosswalk is also you can also import it into document-based authoring and edit it there. Right? It's the opposite, where you need to provide the additional model definition and component definition.
Correct. The Universal Editor needs additional information for the property panel, which is not needed in the documents. So when you go from documents to Universal Editor, you need to create the model definition for this and the other JSON kind of to define what you want to have in the plus menu. The other way around, you don't need to do anything. Other questions?
Yes, they're quite long ones. If you have a multi-field containing 2 text fields, how easy can this achieved with Universal Editors? Yeah.
We have a multi-field, I think. I think we have all these fields now available. And yeah, I don't know exactly the status of the multi-field at that point, if we have kind of the multi-field of fields, because you can basically have multiple fields nested in a multi-field. And I think we support that as well now, but I'm not sure exactly how. And I'm not sure. Yeah, I would need to check this out actually. Yeah.
Okay. Hope that helped. Let me. It's also a long questions. There are in Page Editor, you have a bunch of features that made life of editors easier, like the image editor, create image maps, panel selector, for tabs, and accordions. Um, are these feature all also on the roadmap of Universal Editor already in Universal Editor?
So yeah, great question. So let's start with the in-context image editor. This is something I don't really want to bring back into the Universal Editor. First, it was a nightmare to make it work properly then, and still really doesn't fully work properly. Then I think assets, if you want to crop them, to modify them, it should be done through assets. I mean, it's also a much better separation of concerns between the sites feature and the asset features. If we start to replicate these features in sites, we will not make it as well as what they do in assets, and you will have situations where it doesn't work as expected. So I really wish here we have more of an image picker, that we integrate that well with assets, so that if you have like smart crops or other rules that are defined from assets, that's working well, maybe even to the point where you can control which rendition, I don't know, or which crop you want to have here. That is great, but having here an editor that allows you to crop and to modify the image, this is not something I want to bring back. Then next question was on additional controls. When you had components like tabs or accordions, we had features so that you can easily, in the page editor, move to the different tabs or accordions. Here in the Universal Editor, what we did is everything the author does in the Universal Editor also sends an event into the application. So the application can be made aware of what the author is doing. And one nice thing is with the preview, you could very easily make that the application is made aware, like let's imagine this is our tab component that has different tabs in there, that the author is clicking on one, the next, and so on tab. And then the application could easily switch to that tab and make that tab editable. So it's actually much more simple to instrument things, and that's how we did it also on Edge Delivery Services projects, where we have tabs that actually the authors can switch the tabs with the tree view here, and the application is listening to these events and switching the tabs when one of the components of that tab control is being selected. Yeah, I think that is a good solution, and probably better than what we had before. It's much more straightforward.
Okay, super. Oh, there are questions coming
But
up.
then, yeah, maybe I can continue, because you probably also think of there are other features in the page editor that the question has not stated and that we don't have yet. You could think of the style system. That is one. The style system is not something we plan necessarily to re-implement as is. Maybe at some point we'll create an extension so that you could have your styles as an extension. And actually, I haven't really talked about the extensions yet, because you can actually extend the Universal Editor in many ways. There is here, like the task management panel here is an extension. And this is here, in that case, retrieving my tasks from Workfront. But you could do anything in these extensions. So you could have your own panel here, and we could very well imagine an extension that for the selected component allows maybe to change the styles or even set the layout options, like how wide, because we had also the responsive grid that we don't have yet in the Universal Editor, so that you can here control these features. However, that would be more of a migration path. So for customers who do have these features, they can continue using it here, maybe with such an extension. However, for new projects, I would much rather recommend that you implement these options as component properties, because component properties are now so easy to create. You just add whatever fields you want to add to your property panel. And actually, we have a good example here, maybe in that application, where this component has some options for the color of the background. And this is actually a style. So here you can choose a different color. It could be any style that I'm applying. It could even control maybe the layout of this component, how many columns it's taking, or whatever you want. And you could have on the container component here, typically, a selection like here, you have the style, what style is that container applying, but you could also say, well, how should the elements in this container be displayed? Should it be kind of a I don't know, should it just spread even all the contained elements in different columns? Should it lay them out in 2 columns or in 3 columns? So you could even have column controls on the containers, very easily done that way. And the nice thing is you don't then need to use our own CSS that we have been providing so far. So our responsive grid CSS was really bloated. It was done at the early hours of kind of CSS grid, where we had to kind of define a different class for every combination of columns. Now, in modern CSS, you don't need to do that anymore, and you can have much more efficient CSS. With a few lines, you can define how the elements in your container should lay out. So you control your CSS then, you control what styles you can apply, how many options you have, and you're done. And it's really straightforward. You don't need to know anything AEM specific. You don't need to be an AEM expert to do that. You just add that to your dialog and you're done. So that is, I think, the recommended path for style system going forward. And for responsive grid, you're in charge in your application. You can do anything. There is no limit. You don't need to depend on us, on our technology. Just build whatever you want.
Okay, super. Yeah, we have lots of questions going. I think Lars, I will jump out soon, so
Yep.
I will go through a next question, and maybe you can take them over. There is one question, not about Universal Edit, it's about what is a Crosswalk project, and is it different from EDS?
Yeah, Crosswalk is basically this feature of when you use Edge delivery services with Universal Editor. That is Crosswalk.
Okay. Then there is a long one. If you're creating AEM-specific components and not EDS blocks, is that still the recommendation, or would those be better served using the page editor, and Universal Editor is recommended going forward with the understanding that the new work should be using EDS blocks? Quite a long question.
Sorry, I'm not sure to understand.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in EDS, components are called blocks. It's the same thing, actually. It's just a different terminology, because in documents, we call them blocks. There is no component in documents. So when you edit these blocks in AEM, they are components. We have components or blocks, basically, in Universal Editor and EDS with AEM authoring. Or Crosswalk.
So, Dominic, before we continue with the questions, I have a question for you. When, because I know that you have to jump, when are we meeting next time, and what's going to be the topic?
Yes, so our next meeting will be on September 12th. There's the next one with Ron Nagy. Ron Nagy is just launching, or he just launched in summer break, a new Web Currents video series with the famous speaker Lars, and now there will be a new one with other famous people. So he will speak about what he's doing for the community. This will be one of our next sessions,
Great.
and then 2 weeks later we will have Netcentric, the one I cancelled last week because Jan was sick, and this will be then on the 26th of September.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. So thank you, Dominic.
Thank you.
Yeah. Gabriel, if you have a couple more minutes, I think
Yeah, I do.
We can keep this running and can continue answering questions.
Super. Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you, Lars. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Dominic. Bye-bye.
To all of you.
Okay, so obviously I didn't look at the questions at all, so
yeah, it's good. I think I know where we were. So
okay.
While creating a blog for EDS project, can we use React as well instead of vanilla JavaScript done in block.javascript? If you want to use React on top of Edge Delivery Services, that is possible for typically if you have a product configurator or something like that. You maybe have that block to use some framework to be, because it's a big thing. Sure, that is possible. Just make sure to load React in a way that is not blocking the page speed or initial page load. I don't know how to call which milestone exactly, but yeah, that is possible. You just need to load React in a way that it's not blocking the page, so that authors don't get page slowed down.
Okay.
Then while creating a block for EDS project, can we use, no, that's the same. Can the UI be used on XHL5 serverless repo with multiple brand projects? Would this replace the sidekick for document editing? Not sure to understand. Was this HXL5?
Wait, I don't even see the question.
Harry Garon in anyway. But
okay, so I can answer this. So
okay.
So in Helix 5, or we do have something that we call repoless, not serverless. Right? It's all serverless, but repoless basically means you have one code base, and then you have multiple content sources. These content sources can be AEM sources through Crosswalk, and then use the Universal Editor. So yes, you can replace the sidekick. Well, it doesn't replace the sidekick for document authoring. It would replace document authoring with AEM authoring, and then you don't have a need for the sidekick anymore because it's specific to document authoring. Okay, I'm going to cross that off. Does the editor have scheduling support? Gabriel?
Scheduling, yeah, we are having that. Yeah, not yet here. Wait. Basically, on publish, we plan to extend this dialog so that you can have more options like scheduling, publish later. We also want to have publish to preview here as well. That is useful for headless use cases. So not yet, but it's coming.
Okay. Good. So Ken is asking, will extensions be built via App Builder?
Absolutely. Yep. That's the standard way how you build extensions. And I can quickly show you also the way how you control your extensions. So you go to the extension manager. And here you see all the extensions that have been created for the Universal Editor in our organization, and you can control which ones are enabled, disabled, and yeah, you see we're playing a lot with extensions. We're adding a lot of extensions to the Universal Editor, and it's all Adobe I/O runtime or App Builder. extensions.
Okay. So Raf's question is, when you publish a page through the Universal Editor, does it also take care of invalidating the cache of all associated resources for this page?
Yeah, absolutely. So here it just is the homepage that we need to publish because nothing
Right.
else has changed. Here, for example, yeah, it's also pulling it the references. So here you see on that page I have a lot of content fragments that also have need publishing. So you see that here. And actually, when you have references here, you see one that need to be published. This is also included. You don't control here whether you want to publish it as well. It's kind of implied that if you want to, you're publishing the the main element that you're publishing it, that the reference is also published.
Okay. So there are two questions which are related. One is, can we have a project which uses both document-based authoring and Universal Editor in one Edge delivery project? And is it possible to have multiple mount points? So no, it's not possible to have multiple mount points, but we are working on a feature that we call content overlays, which would be able to do something that's a bit similar, where you basically at the time of publishing something, we would check two different sources, and one of these can be a document source and the other one could be an HTML source, and that would allow you to do essentially this mix, right, where you have some of the content being published out of AEM and others out of Word or SharePoint. So let me.
Yeah. We're at the top of the hour. I can stay a little bit longer, but
Yeah.
really to thank those who have been here for the whole hour, I've a short announcement to make because we now also support basically AEM-6.5 and managed services with the Universal Editor. This is new. Basically, we just made that possible in the past days, and it will be released towards, I don't know, probably early next year, but we are working with VIP customers now. That's mostly useful only for headless use cases, because if you have edge delivery services, obviously you are on cloud service. But we have a lot of headless customers who want to use on-prem or managed services. And we don't want them to use the SPA editor that much anymore. So they can now start using the Universal Editor.
Okay.
That's the news.
So, Gabriel, I'm trying to check off the questions that I think we've answered. But wait, so there's one last question from Amit. If a client is migrating 70 plus sites from AEM on-prem to AEM Cloud, can they use Universal Editor in both non-Adobe hosted and Adobe hosted environments during and after migration? So I think that's going back to your 5.6 announcement, correct? So
yes, but I mean, if you're migrating your customers, I would expect that they are using the page editor.
Right.
And I would not recommend yet customers who are using the page editor to start using the Universal Editor unless they want to redo their websites.
Right.
Because yeah, you can instrument instrument a page with the core components or such also to work and to be editable in the Universal Editor. But you would have to redo your dialogues obviously it would be much simpler to redo your dialogues, but in the end, I'm not sure they would win so much to move to the Universal Editor. Of course, if they really love these extensions that we're building, but these extensions are still very early stage. I mean, it might be more of a topic when we have really these extensions that are really released and they want to use all these extensions and don't want to stay in the page editor because of that. But meanwhile, if the page editor is working, move to cloud service with the page editor. Now, if you want to redo the implementation, then maybe consider edge delivery services anyway. And yeah, then it's a whole different story.
Okay, good. So we are 5 minutes past the hour. I'm going to stop the recording.